Hello friends and welcome to Star Tears. Today, we honor the lives of 5 extraordinary individuals who passed away on November 26, 2025. Every life has a story. Every story carries influence. In this episode, we will explore the journeys and achievements of these 5 remarkable people, those who inspired generations and left lasting legacies. Let's begin with the first of these unforgettable lives. Ann-Margaret Ferrante was an American politician and attorney, best known for representing Gloucester in the Massachusetts House of Representatives and for her lifelong advocacy for fishing communities. Dawn in Gloucester, Massachusetts always arrives with a quiet kind of determination. The sky brightens over the harbor, the gulls circle low above the docks, and fishermen prepare their boats, with the same rituals passed down through generations. In this world of salt, wind, and hard-earned survival, Ann-Margaret Ferrante grew up shaped by a coastal town where community meant everything and every day was tied to the sea. She was born into a fishing family, and from childhood she understood the fragile balance between nature, economy, and livelihood. The ocean was not just scenery, it was the heartbeat of her home. She grew up listening to stories of storms and survival, watching boats leave in darkness and return, sometimes triumphant, sometimes battered, always changed. Gloucester taught her resilience, responsibility, and a profound respect for people whose lives depended on forces beyond their control. While many of her peers dreamed of leaving for bigger cities, Ann-Margaret dreamed of coming back. She left Gloucester to study law, driven by a clear purpose: to become a voice strong enough to represent her community in rooms where decisions were made. For her, the law was never abstract. It was the key to protecting families she knew personally, families whose livelihoods could be wiped out by a single regulation or policy shift. As a young attorney, she returned home not to distance herself from her roots, but to defend them. She worked tirelessly with fishermen, helping them navigate complex federal regulations. They trusted her because she understood the stakes, not in theory, but in lived experience. She didn't speak like a distant lawyer. She spoke like someone who had grown up, hearing the creak of docks and the clatter of lobster traps. Her commitment naturally led her into politics. When she ran for the Massachusetts House of Representatives, Gloucester didn't merely elect a politician, they elected one of their own. Ann-Margaret carried their stories, their struggles, and their hopes with her to the State House. In Boston, she quickly earned a reputation for sharp intellect, meticulous preparation, and an unshakable sense of duty. Her legislative work extended far beyond fisheries. She advocated for education, infrastructure, the arts, public health, and economic development. Yet, no matter how wide her impact spread, Gloucester remained her compass. She walked the same docks she had as a child, visited the same small businesses, and listened to residents with the same sincerity she brought to legal clients. Early in her career, she believed deeply in the idea that progress must be rooted in understanding history, culture, and the human beings behind every statistic. For decades, she served as a bridge between two worlds: the gritty reality of New England's fishing towns and the polished halls of state government. Her life became proof that powerful leadership does not require distance or detachment. It requires empathy, memory, and a willingness to fight for what others overlook. Even as the economy evolved and climate change reshaped coastal life, she remained steady, advocating for sustainable policies that protected both the environment and the communities depending on it. Her work became not just political, but generational, building foundations that would support Gloucester long after her time. Ann-Margaret Ferrante's story is one of loyalty, resilience, and devotion to a place that shaped her. She never sought fame, she sought fairness. She never abandoned her roots, she strengthened them. And on November 26, 2025, Gloucester and Massachusetts mourned the passing of a woman who had spent her entire life trying to make her community stronger, one law, one conversation, one act of service at a time. Sheikh Dahiru Usman was a Nigerian Islamic scholar, teacher, and one of the most influential leaders of the Tijaniya Sufi order in West Africa. In the sun-baked landscapes of northern Nigeria, where faith is woven into the rhythm of daily life. The name Sheikh Dahiru Usman carried a weight that transcended generations. To many, he was a scholar, to others, a guide. But to all, he was a living embodiment of devotion, patience, and spiritual clarity. Born in Bauchi State, Dahiru's early years were steeped in Islamic tradition. His home was a place where the Quran was recited from dawn until dusk, where learning was seen not as a task, but as a sacred responsibility. From the moment he learned to speak, he was surrounded by teachers, elders, and scholars who nurtured his curiosity. His exceptional memory and discipline quickly set him apart. By the time he was a teenager, he had memorized the entire Quran and had begun studying classical texts that most people only encountered in adulthood, seeking deeper knowledge. The young Dahiru traveled across Nigeria and West Africa. These journeys exposed him to a variety of Islamic traditions and scholarly methods. He studied under renowned teachers in Kano, Senegal, Niger, and Sudan, building a foundation not only in Islamic law and theology, but also in the mystical philosophies of Sufism. It was through these travels that he found his spiritual path in the Tijaniya order. As he matured, his reputation as a scholar, preacher, and spiritual guide grew rapidly. Everywhere he went, crowds gathered children, elders, students, merchants, farmers, people from all walks of life drawn to his gentle voice and the clarity of his teachings. Unlike some religious leaders who remained isolated within scholarly circles, Sheikh Dahiru stayed deeply connected to ordinary people. He believed that knowledge meant little if it did not serve the community. He became especially known for his public tafsir gatherings, large open-air Quranic explanations that sometimes attracted tens of thousands of listeners. For hours he would speak, breaking down complex Islamic teachings into simple language that touched the hearts of even those with no formal education. People described his style as calm, steady, and profound. Never rushed, always rooted in compassion, his Quranic school grew into one of the largest in Nigeria, producing generations of memorizers and scholars who carried his teachings far and wide. Many communities across West Africa proudly refer to themselves as students of Sheikh Dahiru, even if they never met him personally, because his influence spread through lectures, disciples, and written works. But beyond knowledge, what truly defined him was character. He was known for eating simple meals, wearing modest clothing, and living without luxury. Even in old age, he insisted on sitting among the people during gatherings rather than on elevated stages. When people asked him for advice, he listened patiently. When conflicts arose in society, he advocated peace, urging people to avoid hatred and violence. In a region often shaken by political and religious tensions, he stood consistently as a voice of unity. Throughout his life, he also became a defender of traditional Islamic scholarship. While modern interpretations and political movements emerged, Sheikh Dahiru remained committed to the classical teachings. He had learned as a young man, insisting that spiritual discipline and inner purification were just as important as outward knowledge. His balanced approach earned him respect from both traditional scholars and younger generations seeking guidance. Even as age began to weigh on him, his commitment never faded. Well into his late 80s and early 90s, he continued traveling for religious events, delivering sermons and leading prayers. People marveled at his energy, attributing it to his deep faith and spiritual discipline. He often reminded his students that life is temporary, and that the true measure of a person is not power or wealth, but the goodness they leave behind. When Sheikh Dahiru Usman passed away on November 26, 2025, Nigeria mourned the loss of one of its most influential religious figures. Tributes poured in from scholars, leaders, and ordinary citizens across West Africa. Mosques held special prayers. His students gathered to recite the Quran in his honor. Communities reflected on the legacy of a man whose teachings had shaped their lives for decades. His passing marked not just the end of a life, but the close of an era, one defined by humility, scholarship, and a deep commitment to spiritual growth. Yet the seeds he planted continue to flourish. His students teach. His words circulate. His influence remains alive in the countless hearts he touched. Pamela Elizabeth Hogg was a British educator, community advocate, and cultural storyteller whose life became a quiet but powerful force of inspiration for thousands. Pamela Elizabeth Hogg's story began in the gentle hills of northern England, where the world felt shaped by the changing seasons, the sound of rain on rooftops, and the old stone buildings that carried memories of generations. From childhood, Pamela was curious in a way that made her stand out. She watched the world not just with her eyes, but with an instinctive desire to understand people, their struggles, their hopes, their quiet habits of living. Her parents were ordinary working people, yet they filled their home with books, conversations, and a belief that education could open doors that otherwise remained invisible. Pamela absorbed this atmosphere like fresh air. By the age of 10, she was already teaching neighborhood children how to read, spreading blankets in the garden and turning them into makeshift classrooms. It was clear long before she knew it herself that teaching would become her calling. As she grew older, Pamela pursued education with a passion that surprised even her teachers. She studied literature, history, social sciences, anything that helped her understand how humans made meaning from their lives. At university, she became known for her soft-spoken confidence, her ability to listen deeply, and her dedication to the idea that knowledge should be shared, not hoarded. When she began her career as a teacher, Pamela discovered what felt like her true home. She didn't simply teach lessons. She built relationships. Her classroom became a place where shy students found their voices, where troubled teens felt seen, and where creativity was treated not as a luxury but as a fundamental part of growing up. She encouraged students to write stories about their own lives, to keep journals, to explore the world beyond textbooks. Many of her former students later said that she was the first adult who ever made them feel capable of greatness. But her impact didn't stop in the classroom. Pamela believed that communities like individuals needed encouragement and care. She organized reading circles for adults, weekend workshops for young writers, and storytelling sessions for elderly residents of local care homes. She spent evenings visiting families who struggled with education, offering advice, support, and sometimes simply a listening ear. She was the kind of person who remembered birthdays, who wrote letters instead of emails, who came to school plays even when she wasn't required to. Her gentle leadership brought her widespread respect, and eventually she became a community education coordinator, a role that allowed her to build programs benefiting entire neighborhoods. Under her guidance, literacy programs expanded, community libraries revived, and countless children gained access to the kind of encouragement she herself had once needed. Yet, with all her accomplishments, Pamela remained humble. She dressed simply, spoke quietly, and often redirected praise to others. For her, success was not defined by awards or titles, but by the spark in a student's eye when they realized they could achieve more than they had ever imagined. In her later years, Pamela turned toward writing. She filled notebooks with reflections, short stories inspired by real people, and essays about compassion, education, and human resilience. Her writing captured the softness of everyday life, the unnoticed acts of kindness, the small triumphs, the moments of connection that gave ordinary days extraordinary meaning. Even though she never sought fame, her work began circulating among educators and community groups, admired for its honesty and warmth. Those who knew Pamela remember her as a woman who carried light in quiet ways, through patience, through dedication, through an unwavering belief that every person deserves to be understood. Her legacy lives in the lives she shaped, the students who became teachers, the adults who discovered literacy later in life, the families whose futures changed because she cared enough to show up. Pamela Elizabeth Hogg's life was not loud or glamorous. Instead, it was steady, meaningful, built on the simple, but profound conviction that kindness in education can change the world, one person at a time. Vsevolod Nikolaevich Shilovsky was a Russian actor, film director, screenwriter, and one of the most enduring artistic voices of Soviet and post-Soviet cinema. His story begins in Moscow, a city that was, even in the mid-20th century, a world of contradictions. Quiet courtyards hidden behind grand Soviet avenues, children's laughter echoing between gray apartment blocks, and the electric pulse of a cultural capital always on the verge of reinvention. Born into an artistic family, young Vsevolod grew up backstage, among the smell of grease paint, the whisper of scripts, and the soft shuffle of actors preparing for roles. His childhood was filled not with toys, but with stories, real, imagined, and everything in between. From an early age, it became clear that the stage was not simply an interest for him, it was a destiny. He studied human expressions with almost scientific fascination, listening to the timbre of voices, memorizing movements, trying to understand what made a character convincing. When he entered the celebrated MCOT school studio, he wasn't just another student. He was a young man who treated acting as a craft of truth, discipline, and emotional honesty. His ascent as an actor began steadily. Directors noticed his ability to carry both strength and vulnerability, confidence and quiet tension. Shilovsky's screen presence was magnetic not because he tried to dominate the frame, but because he inhabited it so naturally. Whether playing soldiers, working-class men, flawed heroes, or complex intellectuals, he brought a sense of lived experience to every role. There was always something deeply human in his characters. A tired smile, a lingering hesitation, a restrained warmth that made audiences feel they truly knew the person on screen. As cinema evolved, so did he. Shilovsky moved behind the camera, discovering a new dimension of storytelling as a director. His films often centered on relationships, memory, and the emotional landscapes of ordinary people. He was patient with actors, encouraging them to dig deeper, to find authenticity rather than performance. Many who worked with him later admitted that Shilovsky changed the way they thought about acting. He taught them to listen, to observe, to feel. Outside of film, Shilovsky became a revered figure at VGIK and other film institutions. As a teacher and mentor, he shaped generations of filmmakers and actors. His guidance was never loud or theatrical. Instead, he shared wisdom through quiet anecdotes, personal stories, and small philosophical reminders that art should never lose its connection to life. Students followed him not because he demanded respect, but because he embodied it. Despite the successes, the awards, and the decades of influence, Shilovsky remained grounded. He cherished simple pleasures, conversations with friends, long walks, theater evenings, the gentle chaos of family gatherings. To those close to him, he was warm, witty, reflective. A man who carried the history of his era with dignity while continuously seeking new creative horizons. In his later years, he continued to act, direct, and inspire, refusing to let time separate him from the craft he loved. His presence on screen remained just as compelling, perhaps even more so. Seasoned by experience, deepened by life, filled with the quiet gravitas that only age can bring. For audiences, colleagues, and students alike, Vsevolod Shilovsky came to symbolize something rare, the living bridge between artistic traditions of the Soviet past and the evolving language of contemporary Russian cinema. Faith Winter was an American politician, community advocate, and one of the most influential voices in Colorado's modern legislative history. Her story began far from the spotlight of state politics, in the rhythms of ordinary life, where she first learned just how deeply public policy could shape the futures of families, neighborhoods, and entire communities. From a young age, Faith carried within her a strong sense of responsibility, a belief that people deserved not only representation, but true guardianship from those elected to serve them. As she grew older, this instinct sharpened into a calling. Before entering the legislature, Faith worked on local issues, environmental protection, community development, women's rights, and youth engagement. She had a talent for listening, for understanding what people were really trying to say beneath their worries, frustrations, and hopes. and she believed fiercely that government could be a tool not of distance, but of direct and compassionate impact. Her political career began with city-level service and gradually expanded as she built a reputation for dedication, patience, and a remarkable ability to unite people who rarely agreed on anything. When she entered the Colorado House of Representatives, and later, the Senate, she brought that same grounded energy with her. The determination to make policy real, human, and practical. Faith Winter became known for championing legislation that touched everyday life. She fought for environmental sustainability, accessible transportation, affordable housing, protections for parents and workers, and the advancement of women in the workplace. Her work wasn't about chasing headlines. It was about shaping systems so they would lift people instead of limiting them. Behind the scenes, she was equally respected. Colleagues often spoke about her patience, her ability to navigate difficult negotiations, and her unwavering calm. Even in the most heated debates, she kept her focus, not on political victory, but on finding a solution that would genuinely help the people of Colorado. Outside the chambers of the Capitol, Faith Winter remained deeply rooted in her community. She attended local events, met with families, listened to teachers, healthcare workers, small business owners, and young activists. She knew that leadership didn't come from a title. It came from remaining connected to the lives of the people she served. Despite the pressures of political life, Faith balanced her roles as a public servant, parent, partner, and neighbor. She believed in the importance of empathy and in the quiet power of showing up, not just when cameras were turned on, but when no one else was paying attention. In the later years of her career, Faith became a symbol of persistence and principled leadership. She continued writing, advocating, organizing, and guiding new voices into public service. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to our channel. Many more stories await.